On This Week in Enterprise Tech, have you ever wondered who would be the recipient of the latest computing award? Well, we talk about the latest ACM Charles Thacker Breakthrough Award and who will be the first recipient. Plus, Heather, Curtis, and I talk with Charles Lamanna from Microsoft about the Power Platform and data integration. Twiat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 337, recorded April 12th, 2019. The Power Platform Movement. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Pulseway, the ridiculously cool IT management software that lets you remotely monitor and control IT systems from any device. It's enabling busy admins to fix issues on the go and be more productive. Try it free for 14 days at pulseway.com/twit. And by Envoy. Envoy builds beautiful, modern software to help businesses elevate their physical workplace experience. With Envoy Visitors, you can greet guests with a welcoming, sleek iPad sign-in app while still protecting your people, property, and ideas. Start your free trial today at envoy.com/twit. And by Grammarly. Grammarly is a communication tool that helps people improve their writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. Start writing confidently by going to grammarly.com/enterprise and get 20% off a Grammarly premium account today. Welcome to Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need some help from some of the top enterprise tech professionals in the industry, starting with our very own Heather Williams, Senior Product Solutions Architect at Ruckus Networks. Heather, welcome back.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me back. Welcome
Absolutely.
to your weekend.
Absolutely. Great weekend. Now, you've been not traveling quite a bit lately. Has that kind of slowed down for you?
It slowed down just for this week. I was able to be home at the perfect time since spring has sprung out here at the little log cabin by the lake. But I will be headed actually towards Denver and a little bit of altitude to go with my attitude for next week.
Fantastic. Well, to add to our expert panel, we have our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, Senior Editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, welcome back. Thanks for coming back to the show.
It's always a pleasure to be here. No altitude in my future, just the requisite sunshine state attitude that everyone knows and loves.
Now, Chris, you were at, Fortnite Accelerate recently? How was that?
I was. It was good. And they were talking about a couple of things that were interesting. The buzzwords, and I'll come back to these on future shows, but when they say they believe that the edge will eat the cloud, they're talking about edge computing, as are a lot of people in the industry. And I think on future episodes of Twiat, it might be worthwhile to take a look at exactly what they mean by edge computing and why so many people think that's going to be a huge trend in the industry this year.
Absolutely. It sounds like a great show. But folks, we do have a great show today as well. Not only are we going to talk about computing awards and the first recipients of it, but we also have a great guest, Charles Lamanna from Microsoft, to talk about empowering users with the Power Platform movement. But before we do, we have to always get into this week's Blips. Now, those of you who have used the Drupal or web content management system out there are some vulnerabilities that have been discovered recently, so you should actually pay attention here. The combination of a couple bugs in the platform make it possible to achieve a one-click-to-code execution issue. Now, bugs numbered ZDI 19130 and ZDI 19291, discovered by Sam Thomas, who's actually the Director of Research at Pentest, is what is actually driving the vulnerabilities, these particular bugs. Now, what makes up these bugs? Well, the 130 bug is actually a PHP deserialization bug that gets us from the site admin to RCE, and the 291 bug is a persistent cross-site scripting vulnerability that allows an attacker to invoke an exploit that forces the administrator to make a malicious request to trigger bug number 130, the PHP deserialization vulnerability. Now, this bug was actually based on the work Thomas presented at this year's past Black Hat. His discovery shows a new vector to triggering PHP deserialization vulnerabilities through FAR archives. Now, at the root of it, metadata PHP file archives is stored in the form of PHP serialized objects. Now, file operations on those archives can trigger unserialization on the stored metadata, which can actually eventually lead to code execution. Now, the other bug leads to the serialization bug is the Perl compatibility regular expression related vulnerability in the handling of uploading file names. Now, where a user uploads a file name, Drupal uses the PRCE to modify the file name to avoid name duplication. Now, a subtle bug has been residing in the code base for the past 8 years and could cause Drupal to drop the file extension of the file name when uploaded multiple times and allowing attacker to upload an arbitrary HTML file. Now, unless PHP decides to modify that archive processing behavior, programmers will need to be extra vigilant when passing user-controlled data through file operators. Now, how can you prevent this attack? Without a software update, well, Drupal cites that disabled user registration and user comments are not susceptible to those attack vectors. But a better solution is to update your Drupal. Update, update, update.
A crackdown on creepware. Since I spend a lot of time thinking about and working with Wi-Fi, you can assume that I have at least an 8th grade understanding of physics. I really won't claim more than that. And yet, I'm confident that any grand unifying theory that comes to fruition is going to include a healthy dose of the law of unintended consequences. I mention this because, like many of you, when apps started showing up like Find My iPhone, Find My Friends, Find My Family, Find My Spouse, I celebrated the progress of technology and how it can be used to make our lives easier. Of course, this was before I understood that there are two kinds of people, and the other kind realized how easy it is to exploit these kinds of apps. And some of those people are creeps. An excellent article in Wired this week details efforts against what has been dubbed stalkerware. Eva Galperin, the director of cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, and on Twitter known as @EvaSide, is the face of these efforts, and she outlines how an entire industry has grown up around spouse or stalkerware, and how it is a, quote, deeply underestimated scourge of digital privacy, and further described it as the small end of a very large, terrifying wedge. Since the predators in these cases often have immediate and intimate access to victims' devices, none of the usual defenses against hacking are of any help. Galperin laid out demands at the Kaspersky Security Analyst Summit in Singapore, including telling the antivirus industry to take the threat of stalkerware seriously, and Apple to take measures to protect iPhone users from stalkerware. The ask of Apple is particularly important since not only do they not allow antivirus apps into their App Store, many of the built-in features of iOS are the exploits themselves. She's also calling on the legal community to prosecute executives of stalkerware selling companies on hacking charges. I wanted to end this blip with a reminder of the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at www.thehotline.org. Ironically, a visit to that site immediately produces a safety alert pop-up that warns visitors that their computer use can be monitored and there is no way to completely eliminate that risk. Enough said.
So there's a flaw in WPA3, but does it really matter? Depends on who you talk to, it turns out, because a pair of researchers, Matti Van Hoof of New York University Abu Dhabi and Eyal Ronen of Tel Aviv University and KU Leuven, have published a paper detailing flaws in the WPA3 handshake process that can allow efficient and low-cost attacks on the passwords used as part of network credentials. In particular, they write that the existing standards that the Wi-Fi Alliance chose for WPA3 brought both timing and cache-based side-channel vulnerability issues to the simultaneous authentication of equals, or SAE, handshake that's a key piece of WPA3's improvement over WPA2. And for a little bit of inside baseball, the SAE handshake is commonly known as Dragonfly, which is why the researchers dubbed the new set of vulnerabilities Dragon Blood. A spokesman for the Wi-Fi Alliance pointed out that the attack comes as part of the process that allows a legacy WPA2 device to attach to a WPA3-enabled access point. The resulting downgrade operation opens up the process to a brute force dictionary attack on the passwords used for authentication. Now, the Wi-Fi Alliance says that they always intended for transition mode to be a temporary measure That would then ultimately be disabled once the network devices have moved over completely to WPA3. So mitigating the vulnerability discovered by Van Hoof and Ronan boils down to two things. First, once you start, transition to a full WPA3 network as quickly as possible, and be sure, as in all things, that you're installing all patches and updates to WPA3 enabled equipment that you've already installed.
Now, remember the massive data breach from Yahoo back in 2013? Well, a total of 3 billion accounts were lost. Now, this included names, email addresses, and passwords from Yahoo properties such as Yahoo Login, sites like Tumblr, Fantasy, and Flickr. Now, the interesting part here is that Yahoo actually took 3 years to disclose the 3 billion count number, which was 3 times the initial number found originally. Now, fast forward to today, Yahoo is starting to be held accountable for this data breach. Now, nearly 200 people who had sensitive information snatched from their Yahoo accounts should receive 2 years of free credit monitoring services and other potential restitution under a legal settlement valued at $117.5 million. Now, the money would be paid by Yahoo's current owner, Verizon Communication, and Alibaba Incorporated, which is actually a holdover from Yahoo's past that still owns a multi-billion-dollar stake in the Chinese internet company Alibaba Group. Now, 117.5 million settlement could become the largest ever given for a data breach. Verizon has since written off much of the nearly $4.5 billion price for the Yahoo acquisition, this proving out that Yahoo's value is diminishing quite quickly. Now, lawyers are presenting the Yahoo account holders' estimate that about 194 million people in the United States and Israel will be eligible to make the claims, according to the court documents. Now, those people collectively may have had about 896 million of the Yahoo accounts hit in the breach. Now, Yahoo account holders who paid $20 to $50 annually for premium email accounts would actually be eligible for refunds up to 25%. And people who had to spend time protecting their identities or dealing with issues caused by the breach can actually seek and be paid at a rate of $25 an hour for up to 15 hours. And that's a maximum of $375. Now, this settlement might be the beginning of organizations being held accountable for the loss of your data. It might just be the ticket we need to get to the privacy movement energization.
Call it the middle child syndrome of IoT malware. In another great dark reading article, just as Marsha wasn't the only child in the Brady Bunch, Mirai is not the end-all and be-all of IoT malware. It's true that Mirai's, quote, dogged persistence on devices around the world have made it the anti-hero poster child of IoT security, but it's certainly not the only piece of malware you should be aware of, unquote. Botnets, including Mirai, have continued to spread, evolve, have new variations, and have had new variations introduced. But the IoT security headache isn't all about botnets. Malware creativity is coming to an IoT near you, and it includes data wipers, crypto miners, and data capture clients. To share your thoughts and fears, jump into the comments section of the Dark Reading article, 7 Malware Families Ready to Ruin Your IoT's Day.
And to tailgate just a little bit on Mo's blip, if you do that, I'll bet that the author will respond to your comment. Now, in other news, a majority of hotel websites are leaking guest booking info. New research from Symantec shows that a majority of hotels, whether they're small independent properties or large 5-star resorts and chains, routinely leak detailed guest booking data with third-party advertisers, social media websites, data aggregators, and other partners. Guest information available to such parties includes, but is not limited to, full name, address, mobile phone number, passport number, and the last 4 digits of credit card numbers. Candid Woost, a threat researcher at Symantec, tested more than 1,500 hotels in 54 countries. He discovered 67% were inadvertently leaking booking reference codes with third-party sites. Now, his research showed that some hotels, in fact, share the booking reference code with as many as 30 different third parties, including social networks, search engines, analytics, and advertising agencies. Nearly 6 in 10 of the sites tested sent a confirmation email to guests after a booking was completed. No surprise there, but the emails contain a link that allows the guest to directly access their reservation details without having to log into a site to do so. Since the emails use a static link, the booking reference code and the guest emails are contained in the URL itself. Now, what makes this an issue is the fact that many hotels load additional content, such as advertisements, on the same booking overview page as the booking itself. For business travelers, the key takeaway here is that personal information, including their full name, home address, email address, credit card details, and passport number, might not be kept private when booking hotels. Be prepared.
Now, as organizations go through their digital transformation and they start moving to a cloud-native environment, they will find that debugging issues in these environments are not always easy. Now, one of the major mechanisms to handle issues and debug problems is usually using log files. Now, there's actually whole enterprises built around these types of solutions where they analyze your log files and assist you in diagnosis. But container applications can add to this complexity because of their level of indirection. Now, to assist in making it easier to debug in production environments, there's systems like Squash, which is actually a distributed debugger. Now, with its latest release, Squash interfaces directly with Kubernetes API. Choose which containers, pods, services, or images you want to debug, and Squash will let you set breakpoints, step through your code while jumping between microservices, and follow variables values on the fly and change these variables at runtime. Now, I've actually used this right from Visual Studio Code, and I can actually breakpoint and walk through the code as I kind of jump through the different endpoints, which is really cool. Now that I run the developer experience app on the Office platform, I can tell you having this functionality for developers is literally a dream. Now, for Java applications, it will automatically find the debug port with Squash that is specified on the JVM when it starts. After the port is located, it uses a port to forward, and then it relies on IDEs to compatibility with the Java debug wire protocol. Now, for Go-based applications, today it's a bunch of hoops you have to go through to get the Go application running on Kubernetes and debugging it. With Squash, it reduces that down to just 2 steps. And anytime tools like these come out, I'll actually let you know in the wild, because they really do reduce the impedance when it comes to production diagnosis. Now, how do I know? Well, Google Cloud actually just jumped in with their release of a set of plugins for IntelliJ and Visual Studio Code that also make it easier to build, debug, and deploy their applications into Kubernetes. Now, not only that, the service will work virtually on all popular programming languages, including Microsoft's .NET Core. Now, if you're interested in developer productivity and agility, it might be time to get your nose out of that log and start debugging. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. But next up, we have the bites. But before we do, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Pulseway. Now, imagine being able to manage and control your entire IT environment from just the palm of your hand or from your device. Reset a user's password from your phone, or kill a process that's slowing down machines and critical paths while taking a stroll in the park. Well, you don't need to imagine anymore. Pulseway lets you monitor, manage, and control all of your Windows, Linux, and Mac systems from anywhere using any device, including your smartphone. Now, Pulseway is pretty much a leading provider of mobile-first, cloud-first remote monitoring and management software. You can monitor everything. See real-time status, system resources, and logged-in users. You can even view network performance, Windows updates, IIS, SQL Server, VMware, Hyper-V, Active Directory, SMP, enabled devices, and more. Now, you can always be in control with this service. You can react to issues right away, fix problems on the go. You can run commands in the terminal. You can manage running processes. You can even restart services, apply those critical updates on demand, and restart systems and more. They handle all the OS and app intricacies for you. No need to figure out for yourself how to write a PowerShell script to do this or that, or even collect data from services. They help you automate just about everything by creating and deploying custom scripts to automate all your IT tasks, saving you time and actually increasing your overall IT efficiency. Now, you can automate anything from backup jobs to security checks on your schedule or on your demand at any time from any of the closest devices that you have to you. Now, you want patch management? Well, this will really help you because you can scan, install, and update all your systems on the go. You can do it on demand or schedule it and execute it on a particular date. Now, quickly and with little effort, connect to any computer as if you were sitting right in front of it without opening any additional ports, creating any firewall rules with remote desktop control. It switches between screens, sends keystrokes, and controls the mouse without having to travel to that machine. And you can do it from pretty much any device. Now, if you were ready to take control of your organization's assets without being confined to your desk or your machine, it's time to take a look at Pulseway. Visit pulseway.com/twit and learn how thousands of organizations and system admins are making their IT environment more efficient, and secure. Try it free for 14 days at pulseway.com/twit. And we thank Pulseway for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time to jump into the bites. Now there are a lot of awards today in computing, but I'll give you an example. The Turing Award's one of them. But last year, ACM decided to create the Charles P. Thacker Breakthrough in Computing Award. Now, named after the legendary Charles Thacker, who was actually a visionary and a hands-on electrical engineer who actually designed the first instances of key computing technologies that define modern life. Now, let's look back a little bit. The modern thing we call the PC with a mouse and graphical user interface was actually developed by Chuck in the early 1970s at Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center. Now, that wasn't Chuck's only contribution. Years after that, the PC, he actually disassembled a Sony Vaio laptop only to reassemble it as the first ever e-reader prototype. Now, with these ideas in hand, he actually joined Microsoft back then to develop the concept of the tablet PC, and years before the market actually saw them. Now, as you can see, Chuck was a visionary thinker and a doer, and even when he won the Turing Award back in 2009, he kept discovering and doing. Now, it's only fitting that this award represents Chuck's do and visionary spirit. Now, in 2018, the Charles Thacker Breakthrough in Computing Award was produced to recognize individuals or groups who have made a surprising and disruptive or leapfrog contributions to computing ideas or technology. Now, you might think, well, who would actually get this first award, right? Because that's a pretty big set of things that could be done here. Well, cloud computing today is based on a technology that allows it to scale, the VM. Now, how about the person we might think for the modern hypervisor? Well, you know, that thing that gives guest operating systems with a virtual operating platform and manages the execution of the OS. Well, by the way, if you want to learn more about that, go check out there's actually a really great, awesome virtualization repo on GitHub, but a lot of the contributions in there you'll see from this individual. Now, for this award this year is going to Mendel Rosenblum for his reinvention of the VM for the modern era. Now, recipients of this award actually are expected to get do the actual lecture at the major ACM conference, as well as they're awarded $100,000 as a cash reward as well. Now, in the late 1990s, Rosenblum and his students at Stanford revisited the idea of virtual machines to develop system software because existing operating systems could not support large numbers of processors. Now, they decided to use virtual machines to run multiple operating systems instances, each with only a few virtual processors. Well, I want to throw this guy to you guys, starting with you, Curtis. What do you think? Is Rosenblum a good choice here for the first ever award?
You know, I think he is, because what he's done is indeed a breakthrough in computing. And I think it's important that this is not something that is a breakthrough only of interest to theoreticians. This is a very practical breakthrough, and I think that matters. The ACM has traditionally been a fairly practically minded organization, but I think this is a really good thing. It rewards someone who has done pioneering work in improving some of the technology that modern commercial computing depends upon, and I like to think it will encourage his peers and colleagues to do more of the same.
Right, makes sense. Heather, I want to throw it over to you. Now, what would you think the data centers today would look like without virtualization, without this kind of discovery that things can be more virtualized and that hypervisor?
I've been thinking about that. I don't know, something like the Death Star is portrayed in a 1950s Ed Wood style movie. Really big, really heavy. I just got to say that I love the fact that Thacker not only has an award named after him, but that he won the Turing Award. There are days when I don't know that I could pass a Turing test, let alone both of these people that no matter what else they do, you could put on their tombstone that they added to the sum total of human knowledge. And I don't know that there's a better tombstone inscription that I could envision. I'll never achieve that, but I think that this is absolutely fantastic.
I agree. Now, Cheebert's here in spirit, obviously. He's also in the chat room lurking. But, Curtis, I want to throw this to you. Now, from Cheebert, he would say, hey, the internet is built on the shoulders of giants, obviously, and that Charles' accomplishments proves out that open source is really needed to advance computing. What do you think here? What do you think of what Cheebert would say?
Well, I agree with the idea of open source, but if you think about it, computing has generally had an element of group collaboration, of community development since the very beginning. I can remember the meetings of organizations like DECUS, the DEC User Society, the software you would get from them, and this was happening in the 70s and early 80s when I was involved with it. So this is not new, the whole idea of open source. And again, I think it's good that this is being honored, that this is part of what we're saying. I was talking to a couple of researchers this week about this idea in a slightly different context. We were talking about security research, which has moved from the commercial researchers and sort of the independent researchers that we've known to academia. Academic publishing works under a different set of rules than the responsible disclosure that we're used to in the security industry. Is that a good thing? How are we going to adapt? So the idea of new ideas coming into an area of research, I think, is exciting and absolutely critical if we're going to keep making advancements like this and keep moving computing on both a commercial and an academic level forward.
Agreed. Now, Heather, I want to actually throw it to you now. Something that Curtis had said before is, hey, a lot of these discoveries are theoretical. They're not usually applied science. But in this case, Charles' accomplishments are more applied. They actually made use out of existing technology. They moved it forward. Now, do you think that maybe his accomplishments being rewarded here by the first ever award, do you think they may have been possibly overshadowed by some of the other people in computing? Like, for instance, there's Wes Peterson, 1961, who worked on that mathematical representation of data for error correction, ECC, or helped modern encryption. And Norm Abramson's LoHaNet, which actually created CSMA, and became the foundations for modern Ethernet with Bob Metcalfe. Now, these sound like things that have actually are application applied science, and they've helped expand, the internet and cloud computing and so on. Do we still think, hey, maybe Charles is a good choice here?
Yeah, and actually, there's a little bit of fallacy in that. Just because you give this this first award to him doesn't necessarily take away from everybody else's accomplishments. And frankly, I always celebrate. Maybe it's just me, but I always celebrate when awards are given or acknowledgement is given for science that has been done for the sake of science, for the sake of adding to human knowledge, because we don't know what we don't know. And we do tend to, maybe it's part of human nature, to put maybe a little too much emphasis on, well, that's nice, but what does it do, sort of thing. It reminds me, speaking of VMs, the first time I saw VMs in action, I walked into a lab and there was a guy who was just losing his mind with excitement. He had probably 10 laptops spread across this 12 by 12 space. And he was so excited because he had run a bunch of VMs. The entire thing, there was not a telephone in the room. He had 200 telephone conversations going on, SIP calls going on across over VoIP using just these VMs. And I said, why? He said, because I could. I could do it. Then look, this is so cool. Now, it doesn't hurt that I actually married the guy, but I would have remembered the story anyway. And so I think that this is all appropriate. And it doesn't take away from what the other research has been doing. Now, if we did something, and let's harken back to something else Curtis talked about when he talked about Dragon Blood earlier, 2 years ago when the world lost its collective mind over crack, that really did take away from good security work that could have been going on, because while people lost their mind and had to scramble to patch a non-real world applicable problem, there was a lot of other patches, as the InfoSec world, if you were on Twitter that week, pointed out. Gee, I've been waiting for 6 weeks for this patch for an attack that's still ongoing. That's the kind of thing we should be more worried about. But giving an award to a well-justified and well-earned series of body of work is not causing part of the problem.
Agreed. Well, folks, that does it for that bite. I do want to throw it over to Curtis because he has a really great bite about, it's getting close to tax season. What about tax hacks, Curtis?
The criminals out there are of a sort that they're not likely to let any opportunity to launch new attacks go unexplored. And tax day in the U.S. is no exception. Well, for most Americans, tax day is a red flag deadline on the calendar. This year, it happens this coming Monday on April 15th. For cyber criminals, it's one day out of a season marked with scams to deceive victims out of money and personal data. Now, seasonal threats are absolutely common among cyber criminals. They will exploit holidays, news, global events, sporting events, you name it, in order to take advantage of times when people have let down their guard. Now, one of the biggest lures is tax season in the U.S. because it starts in January and it really continues through May or June. And it deals with two things criminals love to capitalize on. One is money, and the other is fear. Tax fraud is an old problem manifesting in new ways as more people file taxes online. And it should be noted that the IRS expects more than 90% of tax returns will be prepared electronically using tax return software this year. So IBM X-Force, their researchers recently discovered several of these ongoing tax theme campaigns, 3 of which affect businesses as well as consumers. Attackers will attempt, to trick victims with messages appearing to be from major accounting, tax, and payroll services like ADP and Paychex. Malicious Microsoft Excel attachments will pack TrickBot, which is a common banking Trojan that infects devices and it steals data, and follows up with the glorious opportunity for wire fraud from the owner's account. Now, these frauds take place against both consumers and businesses. This isn't just something that we can smirk about the stupid consumer being involved with. These scams are often very skillfully done, involving spear phishing with a lot of very accurate data thrown in to pack around the malicious payload, and they cause enormous problems. All the attackers really need is one person on a company staff to believe a fake email, and they're in. Once they have a toehold on a single machine, they spread laterally, and, well, from the attacker's point of view, the sky's the limit. So what's the point of all this? What's the state of the art? Taxpayers filing via mobile app should be especially alert for fraudulent activity this year. Now, while most apps for tax filings are secure and don't store data on the device, fake mobile apps often impersonate popular tax filing services to get people to give up sensitive data. Now, while most of these are going to be on third-party stores that are known to be less secure, a few have also been seen on official Google and Apple app stores. There are ways to spot these fake apps, researchers point out, and they used a fake H&R Block app as an example. For starters, there will be no developer listed. That's a huge red flag. They'll also require more permissions than necessary. If a tax filing app asks to use your microphone, your camera, wants to use a cloud service you've never heard of, these are all huge red flags. So What do we do about it? That's the real question. We've seen the evolution in tax fraud because there are now lower prices for identity theft on the dark web. Basic information on consumers has become commoditized, and of course, as we know, commodity prices tend to drop. What the criminals are looking for now are new products so that they can do things like get home equity loans in the victim's name, get more credit cards in the victim's name, and do other much more serious bits of financial fraud, all in the victim's name. So I want to turn to my co-host, and Lou, to you first. You know, you are part of a large team. You see people. So how often do people that you see on a regular basis talk about the attacks, the security issues that come up around things like the Olympics, the NCAA Final Four, the Super Bowl, and other major events? Is it something they seem to be aware of, or do you think it would surprise a lot of them to hear that this is a thing?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because I think there are a lot of organizations that seem to overlook the fact that, you know, during these big events, there's a lot of information flowing, a lot of information asks. And so we have to be more aware, more cognizant of that. Most of the people I do talk to, people I know that work at Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, they are aware that big events like this does cause issues because people are starting to target specific systems, things that are more, like you were talking about, things that are more recognizable, replacing them with lookalikes, and then attempting to do phishing and so on and so forth. So tax season is definitely also on that list of events that people target. So I would say a lot of organizations in the industry are aware of this. One, because they watched a lot of the traffic that comes through, and they notice, hey, a lot of it is fraudulent activity. But there are a lot of organizations that don't. So these are actually great ways to make them aware and to bring information to them. So yeah, this is great.
Well, I'm going to come back to you because you are involved in business applications. Now, I had my first email account that would go to more than a single closed network in the mid-'80s. So we've been dealing with this kind of thing for coming up on 40 years. Why are we still in a point where email is viable as an attack vector? Isn't this the sort of thing that we should have an absolutely airtight technological fix for by this point?
Yeah, I mean, email is one of those fickle things because it's written, right? And so people can find ways to, social engineer you to actually track things and do things that you would not normally do. Perfect examples are, a lot of these scams around helping you fix your PC. I see a lot of people, young and old, get kind of caught into these things. They get caught into the moment of, oh my gosh, like my machine's under trouble. I've paid thousands of dollars for it. Let me go and do something to fix it. So like, is there fixes for social engineering? I would say, over time, people get smart and they're educated and they work through it. There are services, applications, and integrations that do help with this. But they can never help with everything. I mean, phishing attacks alone, if you get an email from somebody, whether it's an external email or even an internal email, you have to be smart enough to know, hey, maybe I shouldn't click on this link, or maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should be aware that, this person would never ask me that. I don't know. Is there a solution for this entirely and going in the future? Probably not. I mean, they will always find ways to socially engineer and work past it. So again, it's more education than anything.
Well, this is one of those things, as with pretty much the changing of the seasons, we know that tax is going to roll around every year. So it's unlikely that we're going to see an endpoint solution anytime soon. Stay tuned. I have a feeling we're going to have lots to talk about on this in years to come. And hey, everyone, be careful out there. Well, with that, we'll close up the bite. Lou, turn it over to you because I think your favorite part of the show is just around the corner.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Well, soon up, right after this sponsor, we're going to talk with a great guest to talk a little bit about the Power Platform. But before we do, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Envoy Visitors. Now, when guests visit your business, your kiosk or booth, or even your event, there's always first impressions, right? Well, let's make it easier for your visitors to arrive and check in with Envoy. Now, Envoy Visitors pretty much changes the game. It's time to welcome those guests to your modern lobby where your organization will be ready for everything that comes through your front door. Now, Envoy Visitors is actually an iPad kiosk that makes workplaces more efficient. Now, how does it work? Well, when visitors arrive, they sign in on an iPad kiosk. They enter their details, and they actually can sign legal documents like NDAs right there on the iPad. Now, Envoy then notifies their host. It actually alerts people when a guest arrives, and it essentially saves you time and hassle. Now, your employees know who's coming and when, and it makes for less awkward meetings. Make sure that those things are really a thing of the past. Now, having customer and partner meetings all the time, I can tell you that having a system like Envoy Visitors streamlines the process for you and your visitors. You walk up, you sign in, and you really make an easy experience. Now, boost your office efficiency with more smart security that doesn't intimidate people. There's no more paper logbook that doesn't provide any real value. Sign in unlimited visitors, print customized badges, send alerts with VIPs when they arrive. It even notifies administrators about unintended guests. Now, you can integrate with existing security systems like Wi-Fi access, ID checks, and emergency notification, which will actually add to the security perimeter and strength. Plus, you'll be able to add data on all of your visitors in your office so you know who's coming, when they're on site, and why they're meeting and who they're meeting with. Now, Envoy Visitors works with tools like you already enjoy using. Like, for instance, it works with Active Directory, Slack, Okta, OneDrive, Skype for Business, Box, Salesforce, Chatter, and more. And if you have your favorite pre-existing system, check out envoy.com/twit to see if they have an integration that you might need. Plus, they have a really great API if you don't have an integration there that you need. Now, they also have designed to help companies of all types, including those in highly regulated industries, so meet security and compliance requirements. Join companies like Nike, Pinterest, and Spotify that have worked with Envoy to welcome over 30 million guests. Now, protect your people, property, and ideals the welcoming way with Envoy. See why 10,000 workplaces worldwide choose Envoy to make a great first impression. Go to envoy.com/twit and start your free trial today. That is envoy.com/twit. And we thank Envoy for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today we have Charles Lamanna, General Manager of Application Platform at Microsoft. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lou. Really happy to be here today.
Absolutely. Now, our audience really loves origin stories. Now, your particular journey through the industry is actually quite interesting. Can you take us through your journey and how you ended up as the GM of the App Platform Group?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely would say it's interesting. So I joined Microsoft actually out of college, worked in Office 365 for a few years. Then I left to go start my own company. That company is very much focused on public cloud, cost management, health monitoring, right when public cloud was just getting off the ground. Did that for a little bit, and that was acquired back into Microsoft. I worked in Azure for a few years, and now I'm on the next big thing, which is the Power Platform. So really excited about where I am today at Microsoft.
So that's a good segue because there are a ton of cool things to cover here. Now, I actually been in this world before, as you know, so I'm going to be like a kid in a candy shop. So hopefully we'll get too off topic. But let's start with the Power Platform because you kind of talked about that for a second. Can you kind of give us a quick overview of the different solutions here and what you are trying to solve with them?
Absolutely. So Power Platform is a term that's kind of just barely have been breathed into existence the last few months. It really is talking about three products from Microsoft: Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow, each of which are low-code or no-code tools to very easily analyze data in the case of Power BI, very easily develop mobile or web applications in the case of Power Apps, or very easily automate things or integrate things in the case of Microsoft Flow. And the problem we're really trying to solve with the Power Platform is when talking to customers, there's really thousands of different applications that IT or developers want to go create that are specific to that business, but they're not able to keep up with it because it's too expensive or takes too long. But the Power Platform really brings the tools to the end users, the business users, people who could use Office or Dynamics or Salesforce or Slack or whatever it is to actually go create these solutions themselves. So that's kind of the real big transformation we're doing with the Power Platform is empowering the end users in a modern cloud and mobile world.
That's great. Yeah. So I think let's dig in a little bit more. So I think you said like for instance, Flow. I'm full disclosure. I use Flow every day. But what is Flow trying to solve? Like, what is it trying to do? What does it allow a customer? What does it allow a customer to solve in their aspect?
Yep. Yeah. So Flow is all about automating tasks that you do at work that you don't want to be doing manually each and every day. So everybody has things like this. You get an email from a customer, you got to go take the attachment and move it to your CRM. Or when you get a particular message on Slack, you want to go bring it over to a different channel that you use, like maybe inside of Outlook. That's where the rest of your team is. You can do all of that with Flow. And what's special about it is it has connectors to over 230 systems. From Adobe to Zendesk, Microsoft, and other non-Microsoft products. It makes it very easy to just click and drag and drop things together in that Flow Designer, which is on the screen right now, to go connect data and events and actions across all these different systems. So what we see our customers tend to do is just, I have just those manual tasks. I want to go make my team or myself more efficient, and you can go take care of that with Microsoft Flow.
Fantastic. Now I've used a lot of these other products before. There's some other ones in the industry like IFTTT. There's Zapier, and then recently there was Zuqua, which actually was acquired by Okta. And they allow for different integrations, not as much as the Flow platform, but they also offer templates and recipes and workflow customizations. Now, what is like Flow trying to do to say, hey, we do more, we allow you to do more, we're a platform more than anything else?
Yeah, so in the case of like say IFT or Zapier, IFT very much is more consumer oriented, very IoT heavy presence, and we see that not overlapping as much with the Zapier or Microsoft Flow customer base, which are much more focused on automation and efficiencies at work. And in the case of Flow, one of the big focuses for us is we just try to integrate Flow in all the systems you already use. And what we mean by that is we have a Flow bot for Microsoft Teams. We have Flow integration in Excel. We have Flow integration with a bunch of other different systems and services. And kind of the overarching idea there is just you don't always want to go to a different tool or a different context to go create these automations or find the templates. You can just do it right inside of the tools you know and love. So that's a really big focus for us with Flow. And just, again, that very much a slant towards the business and professional type of tasks that you see in the enterprise.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about a little bit about Power Apps, because I know that we've had several guests on the show, like Appian was one of them. They talked about kind of the low-code solutions, being able to help like organizations who don't necessarily have the experience to develop their own applications, so allowing them to go in and use kind of a user experience to go and develop these applications. One of the areas that they called out that's really hard is data modeling. Being able to take your data from one system and model it in these applications. How does Power Apps actually helping that?
Yeah. So a key part of Power Apps is something called the Common Data Service, which basically is a database as a service, which can sit behind all your applications to collect data. And inside the Common Data Service, we have something called the Common Data Model. And we have a few hundred well-defined entities and schemas which describe common things that you would use in a business, like an account or a contact or a customer or a product. Things like that are included in that Common Data Model. And we also have a bunch of industry and vertical accelerators and solution packs. So you can get the financial services Common Data Model or the not-for-profit Common Data Model. And what we see customers do with that today is just they can very easily bring information into the Common Data Service with the schema and have a single way of talking about the most important business data for them. And that's something really, I think, born out of the history of Power Apps, because that tight connection it has with Dynamics 365, where that data model is so key to the overall application and offering.
Makes sense. Now, the Power Platform is actually really powerful, as we can see. Now, one thing, I've talked to a lot of customers out there, and they get kind of confused sometimes. Obviously, we talk a lot about Flow, but there's also Logic Apps too. What's the rule of thumb to pick between the two?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we focus on between Flow and Logic Apps is Logic Apps is heavier slant towards integration. So if you're looking for an integration platform like an iPaaS offering or something like BizTalk Server but in the cloud, Azure Logic Apps is a perfect fit for that. And you can see that with things like its integration account, integration environment concepts, whereas Flow is very much about personal and team automation. Behind the scenes, Flow uses Logic Apps actually. Like when you go create a Flow, it's creating a Logic Apps behind the scenes. But Flow is much more polished and built out to go make it easier to do those simple business automations that everybody's familiar with.
Makes sense. Now, as you kind of alluded to, Dynamics 365, CRM, ERP systems are really kind of a huge topic. Now, how you're saying you're focusing a lot more on solutions here for the regard to the Power Platform. How does this relate to Dynamics? Like, what are you guys doing that helps integrate to the Power Platform and make it easier for you to kind of do a one-click solution?
Yeah, so it's an internal detail, but it's an interesting one. The Power Platform, a big chunk of the technology is actually from the Dynamics 365 platform. So Dynamics 365 literally runs on the Power Platform. Our CRM offering is literally a Power App, and it literally stores all its data in the Common Data Service. So from that perspective, all the tools that you learn in the case of managing a Dynamics implementation, those carry over very naturally to Power Platform implementations as well. And that's what we see a lot of our partners or customers doing, is taking that Dynamics experience and applying it to custom line of business applications with Power Apps or Flow and so on.
Fantastic. Well, folks, when we come back, we do want to talk a little bit more about the Power Apps platform and Dynamics 365. But before we do, we want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Grammarly. Now, there's always that tool that really helps you a lot, and you keep coming back to it, over and over again. And for me, that really is Grammarly. Not only does it help you write better content, but it also helps you write better emails as well. Now, Grammarly will help you correct your writing skills by assisting in grammar, phrases, and sentences. It will literally evolve your writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. Now, the free version alone will make you a better writer with its advanced review of critical spelling and grammar. But Grammarly Premium adds some amazing features. In addition to spelling and grammar, Premium helps with advanced punctuation, structure, style within context, vocabulary suggestions, conciseness, and readability for different occasions. Now, have you ever written an email, especially to an executive, and then go back and reread it after you sent it and notice that some of the sentences were almost incoherent with the way you worded them? Well, being a father of 4 and sleep deprived, I can tell you that happens to me a lot. And in fact, our guest today is an executive, and that I had to actually do a double take on the email I sent to him about the show. But Grammarly will literally fix this problem for you. It'll give you the ability to trust what you send or write from now on. Get this, 76% of surveyed premium users now find writing more enjoyable because of Grammarly. For me, it really does become more enjoyable. I can trust that I won't send bad content anymore because I can lean on Grammarly. Now, tools are always better when they integrate with apps I use every day. Grammarly integrates with Microsoft Word, Outlook, and more, and they have extensions in all browsers from Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Firefox. And there's a desktop app as well. Now, do you travel a lot? Well, if you do public transit and you work on those trains or on those buses, you can use your phone for everything. And Grammarly has you covered because it now works with iOS and Android as well. For me, iOS and the Grammarly keyboard is a lifesaver. Autocomplete on these other operating systems can sometimes fail. Well, that's where Grammarly keyboard jumps in and helps you and makes you write better, and it just looks better too. If you haven't tried Grammarly yet, go get it. It will literally make you and your life better with writing better. Now go to Grammarly.com/enterprise to get 20% off your Grammarly premium account today. That's Grammarly.com/enterprise for 20% off your Grammarly premium account. And we thank Grammarly for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we're talking with Charles Lamanna, General Manager of Application Platform at Microsoft. Charles, before I bring my co-host back in, I do have another question. And this kind of leads to, I know a lot of people in the industry are talking about that we're in the fourth industrial revolution and that AI is kind of driving that revolution. What about AI? What is Power Apps and the Power Platform doing anything with AI, and how does it integrate?
Yeah, I think we agree completely with that worldview. And the way we think AI is really important to something like Power Platform, a lot of other Microsoft products, is really infused in the existing offerings. And a great example of that is what we announced last November with what we call AI and BI in the case of Power BI. So you can actually use the simple clicks with no code, no data prep, no Python, to go do classification, prediction, regression modeling, and things like that on data sets that you've loaded inside of Power BI. So that's the same type of idea of the overall Power Platform, making it accessible to anybody, even not developers, not data scientists, and making it easy for them to go put AI in their dashboards and in their analysis. So that's kind of how we think AI will evolve over time. And even in the case of Microsoft Flow, we actually use AI to make recommendations to our customers as they author flows. we suggest the right outputs and the right steps based on machine learning from other automations that we've seen in the system. So that's kind of a good example of it just being infused all over the Power Platform to just make it more efficient to go create these things without a ton of effort.
Makes sense. Now, we actually heard, some like Oracle and SAP, Salesforce, they're embarking in AI as well. Like Salesforce has Einstein. And the interesting thing about what they're doing is they're trying to do similar to what Microsoft's trying to do, is build out solutions so that customers know, okay, well, if I'm, let's say in my services platform, I get recommendations on cases and responses, I get predictive closing times. Is this something that Microsoft's looking to do as well? Is this something that maybe will integrate in the platform into the solutions as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the case of Dynamics, which is like our business applications for Microsoft, runs on top of the Power Platform, we have a bunch of AI capabilities to do very similar things, to do lead or opportunity scoring, or to make predictions on what's the next best action for a seller to do. Or we use AI to go do grading of telesales or customer support calls. Those are all examples of how really in every aspect of how you do business, AI will permeate and make it better and more efficient. And in our case, we don't see it as a replacement of humans doing the job, but much more of an empowerment and enhancement of people doing the job. And yeah, here's a great example on the screen of a bunch of those different AI applications that we have in Dynamics today, really adhering to that overall principle.
Very cool. Well, I do want to bring my co-host back in because I do have a bunch of questions for you. So I'll start with Curtis. Curtis, you want to talk a little bit about training wheels?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I'm a big fan in general of low code and no code solutions. I think they allow people, especially out in the business units, to make processes happen automatically without having to go through the IT department. The problem is that they're able to make some things happen without involving the IT department. And so my question is, what kind of training wheels do you have in place with Flow to keep someone in, say, the marketing department from writing a flow that takes advantage of existing enterprise applications, does something unexpected, and runs a critical application off the rails accidentally?
Yeah, I think the joke we make is we've made it so easy for everybody to create these things. Now we have to go help them do that in a controlled way. So that's a really big focus for things like Flow. So one of the unique things that Microsoft has in the Power Platform is very powerful governance technologies for admins. So if you're a Power Platform admin, say sitting in IT, you can create data loss prevention policies or even create basically guardrails for your employees. So you can create things like you're not allowed to take data from SAP and post it to Twitter because it's probably not a good thing for you to be doing. And that will be enforced for everybody in your company whenever they go create a flow. And the whole idea there is we want to make it very, very easy for people to be creative and empowered, but to do it in a way that adheres to the security and the compliance regulations of that particular company. And like financial services companies and insurance companies are two of the biggest segments where we see a ton of traction for the Power Platform. And for them, it's incredibly important that they have that governance built in. Otherwise, it's too easy for sensitive information or internal trade secrets to be leaked externally. So things like data loss prevention, things like the admin center, things like reporting on usage in the company are all tools that we give to the IT department to kind of keep control while at the same time empowering everybody to go create what they want in the business.
Heather, you get some questions about security as well, right?
Right. And as always, there's always the question about how does GDPR affect the work that you're doing. But I'd also like to tag on to it because you were talking about security and compliance. We talked last week, I believe, or a few weeks ago, about companies requiring, if you have a BYOD device, requiring that you put some kind of governance software on there in order to be able to access company resources like emails. So along with the GDPR, is there a component of this that would keep you from directing, say, resources off to like a private email server? Because yes, I had to go there with her emails.
Yeah. So the data loss prevention policies help with that. So you can create a rule which says nobody's allowed to move data from Exchange Online to Hotmail. And that way you can actually ensure that data is not flowing from a business boundary that's controlled and governed by IT over to a consumer or non-secure environment. Or in the example of like Microsoft IT internally, we have a couple hundred data loss prevention rules in place. Like I can't copy information from SharePoint to Dropbox because that's not approved by our IT department for security reasons, and just how we actually govern our systems. So that's how you can kind of take control of it. And in the case of Power Apps and the Common Data Service, we do have built-in capabilities to simplify some things like GDPR, so that you can, say, collect customer and user information and not have to be as concerned about it being hard to go clean up or to be forgotten or audited over time.
Fantastic. I do have one more question, a little bit about, we talked a lot about Dynamics 365 and integrations to that and providing solutions for that. But what about Office 365? Well, there's a lot of people out there that use Office 365. How is this, how are the Power Apps platform, and what kind of solutions are being provided to integrate to there as well?
Yeah, so the Office integration is one of I think the most unique things about the Power Platform. And for the Power Platform, we have a few million monthly active users. And of those users, the majority actually first discover the product through Office and through that Office integration. So if you go to SharePoint Online and you look at a list or a document library, you'll see a button saying Customize in Power Apps or Build an automation with Flow. And that's completely natively integrated and is the story for how you extend or customize SharePoint. And that's the same thing in Teams. There's a Teams bot for Microsoft Flow, which allows you to author and run and interact with Flow from inside of Teams. And you can also use Power Apps and Power BI to build new tabs inside of Teams without having to write any code. Same thing as in Excel, where you can easily take an Excel sheet and then upgrade it to a Power BI dashboard just to maybe simplify some sharing, or you can go convert it to the backend for a Power App, or even just run flows directly while selecting a cell inside of Excel. And kind of the list goes on and on. But the overarching idea kind of goes back to what I talked about a little bit earlier, which is we want to bring these tools to where users already are. And the reality is there's a humongous number of users that live in Office each and every day. So we want to go bring the Power Platform set of capabilities right to their fingertips where their eyeballs already are and where they already spend their time.
You know, I have a question based off that. You want to bring the tool to where the users are. You had spoken earlier about using artificial intelligence and machine intelligence to help with that. As you look at what you're trying to do and where the technology is, can you foresee a time when something like Flow is more proactive? You know, there are systems that will go in and say, we noticed that you've done this 3 times. You really should automate it, and all you have to do is push this button and a flow will begin. I mean, do we ultimately get to that point, or do you think it's always going to have to be a push activity from the user point of view?
So absolutely, I definitely think we'll get to that point. And we have the beginnings of that. So if you're in SharePoint, for example, and you want to go create a flow while looking at a SharePoint list, there's a set of pre-built flows and templates that we actually recommend based on various parameters of how you're using Flow and that list. And that's kind of a very point-wise solution today, but our goal would be that we can ultimately use Flow to understand what you're doing each and every day to tell you what's possible to automate. Because I mean, that matches very much with what our vision is. We want to empower everybody to work better, to work more efficiently. And if we can go help them with flows to solve common repetitive manual tasks, we're going to go do that as much as possible. And we have a good data estate as Microsoft that we can use in a trustworthy and compliant way to guide our customers to the most efficient automations over time.
Fantastic. We've been talking with Charles Lamanna, General Manager, Application Platform at Microsoft. Thank you so much for being here, Charles. Unfortunately, we've run really low on time, but before we close up, we wanted to give you a chance to kind of say, hey, this is where people can go to learn about the Power Platform, where they can try it out, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so if you just go to powerapps.com, powerbi.com, or microsoft.flow.com, any of the websites for the Power Platform, it takes a few seconds to sign up, and you can have your first app, your first dashboard, or your first automation in just a few minutes. And it's, I think, a really important thing for Microsoft moving forward. It's one of our big areas of investment, and it's one of the things that we're using to change how our companies that we support our customers work in the future. So hopefully all the discussion today was useful and gave a good picture of what's possible with the Power Platform.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast, according to 9 out of 10 email flows and integrations. But I want to thank everyone who makes the show possible, especially my co-host in crime, starting with our very own Mo Williams. Mo, where can folks at home find you and all of your work?
Well, if you want some good barbecue, come out to East Texas and I'll help you out. But for the most part, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Mo Better Wi-Fi.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, of course, we have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks find you traveling around this world, and as well as all of your work?
Well, I actually get to stay home for a week or so. Looking forward to that. I'll be writing, as always, at darkreading.com. You can find pointers to my writing there at Twitter. I'm at KG4GWA, and on Instagram, I'm at Curt Franklin. I'm also getting ready for Interop. You know, Interop is a different beast than it used to be. Gone is the huge expo floor and the small conference. Now it's a really deep conference with a very small expo floor. But if you want to know about networking and security, it's still a really cool place to be. Hit me up on Twitter. I have some discount codes to pass out.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Curtis. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You are that person that drops in each and every week to watch and listen to our show. We want to thank you for doing that to get your enterprise goodness, and we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen to the show. Go out to right now to our show page at twit.tv/Twyet. There you'll find all of the information about our back episodes, of course, show notes, information about our guests as well as our co-hosts. But also next to all that goodness in those videos, you'll find those really important video and subscribe buttons, those download and subscribe buttons. There you can choose your audio version of your choice, the video version of your choice, or the HD video version, and listen on any one of your devices. It's the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT goodness, so go ahead and subscribe today. Now, after you subscribe, remember, we do this show each and every week live at 1:30 p.m. Pacific at live.twit.tv. Come see how the show is run and all the behind the scenes. And if you're going to join the show live, you might as well go ahead and jump into the chat room live as well. I keep it up here on my top screen so I can see all the questions that come in, and we actually throw some of those out as we work through the show. So come in and join us there as well. Also, don't forget, you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There you can see all the work that I do at Microsoft, as well as you can check out dev.office.com, where you can see all the posts, the latest, the greatest stuff you can do to customize and be more productive on Office. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week to do this week in Enterprise Tech. We couldn't do it without them. Also, thank you to all the engineers at Twit. Of course, thank you to our producer, our tireless producer, Mr. Brian Cheebert, who is always planning and getting different guests. He's doing things. He's being very agile, and we thank him for all his work that he does and helps make this show great. Of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. Victor, you got a camera on you there, sir?
Kind of. I'm all the way
there's
back
a better
here.
one. I've seen there's a better one. You guys just don't like to use it.
That one's not on. But
there's Alex running to get it going. You know the tradition. What was the kind of the topic of today's show?
I think it was how to impress Mo. I think it has something to do with multitasking and having
something like that.
Having a lot of computers open, right?
Right, something like that. Yeah. Good work, Victor. Well, maybe next time, sir. Maybe next time. But of course, it was about the power of platforms and integration. But we'll try next time, sir. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca saying, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.